people have resorted to using soil bacteria because they are stronger. They can give you quicker symptomatic relief, but anytime those microbes are allowed to overgrow, they will and can produce toxins that will harm the body. Spore-forming organisms are meant to live in the soil. You know, just to use common sense, your mother told you if you bring in stuff from the garden, she always told you to wash it, right? She didn't tell you to sit down and eat it. Why did she tell you to wash it? It's because the soil contains these organisms. And in minute amounts, they're not going to harm you, but taking billions of them is a very dangerous concept.
Hello, I'm Robin Jeep with Enliven Foods. And today I have a guest that I'm so honored to have. This is Natasha Trenev, and she is probably the pioneer in probiotics. And she is also called the mother of probiotics. And I'm going to let her tell you how she got that name. And we're going to go into some very interesting subjects. And one subject that we're going to go into is my issue that I'm dealing with right now. And I think it will help a lot of you, a lot of people who are experiencing this to understand it better, because there's not a lot of science about it. But before we get into that, I would like for Natasha Trenev to tell us a little bit about herself, where she comes from, why she's the mother of probiotics. And I'm just going to let you take it from there, and then we'll go into the issue.
Thank you. It's been a lifelong endeavor on my part, 55 years involvement in first the field of fermented foods. My family is from the former Yugoslavia. My father's Macedonian. And we brought the art of making natural style Bulgarian yogurt to the United States. And he started a business in the mid-1960s. And to the best of my knowledge, we were the first to sell a natural style Bulgarian yogurt to the United States. And at that time, most people didn't even know what yogurt was. And we also introduced in the late 1960s, early 1970s, a formulation for kefir, which we licensed Altadena Dairy here locally to make. So, you know, I was the first one to set a natural yogurt standard in the state of California in 1969 while I was still a student at UCLA. And then later I was asked by the state of New York to fly out. And sometimes in the mid-1970s, late 1970s, I was asked to testify so that they could set a real kefir standard, because people coming in from the former Soviet Union were protesting that products were mislabeled and people were selling stuff that they called kefir that didn't taste like anything they had back home. Unfortunately, that happens to be the problem ongoing. I also set two probiotic labeling standards, one accepted by the entire health food industry, thousands of members in 1989, and that standard was later read into a congressional record in 1994, which everybody ignores. And the reason that standard was read into congressional record is because we promised Congress we were going to self-regulate. And so that was the first book that I helped to compile with the probiotic standard and other standards in there that we submitted to Congress. Unfortunately, the minute that was passed, everybody developed immediate amnesia, and the standard was ignored. And the reason they asked me to set the standard, because I did the pioneering work with the University of Nebraska in the mid-1970s to help establish the production of the first probiotic bacteria, the Lactobacillus acidophilus, DDS1. And I was the first to introduce a freeze-dried version of that bacteria to the world in 1982. So as far as I know, no one at that moment used the word probiotic for human supplementation. Probiotic was used in the animal feed industry. And I said to myself, well, if farmers are convinced by some manufacturers to feed so-called probiotic products to the animals to keep them healthy so that they could, make better money. I'm saying, well, if farmers, who are one of the smartest people I know, are using these products to keep their cattle healthy and not expose them to use of antibiotics, why aren't human beings afforded the same, way to get better and stay better? And so, it's a long history, but subsequently, it was the first to introduce a bifidobacteria product in 1984, 1986. Two species of bifidobacteria. Of course, nobody knew what I was talking about for at least a couple of decades. First introduced another bacteria called the Lactobacillus bulgaricus, which was for the transient flora. And then, of course, introducing the bifidobacteria, both in my regular products and the bifidobacteria infantis for infants, the first one to introduce the exact bacteria needed by healthy mothers and healthy infants to stay healthy. And so I lectured across the world to introduce the concept of probiotics and why they were so essential to our well-being and health. And for me, my Australian customers were the most, engaging and the ones who were most thoughtful of me. And so a gentleman flew out here to see me, and I believe it was 2016, and to ask me to supply exclusively his franchise in Australia with our precision probiotics. And I said, well, why are you coming to me? And he says, you're the mother of probiotics.
That's where that came from. I see.
So that's how I got the illustrious name. And, I've lectured across the world. I've done thousands of interviews. I've written 3 books. And the reason I'm still staying at 77 is because this field is vastly confused. And that's because of marketing. And we really need these products now because we have chronically ill people in North America. The numbers I have is 80% of the adult population is chronically ill. 60% of the children are chronically ill. And basically, we have a disaster because there's 10,000 toxins in our food, in our air. I don't know how many thousands of toxins are in our air, in our soil, in our water. So our body is being bombarded with toxins every day, which is destroying the composition of our microbiota, which is called now the microbiome. And actually, the microbiome means the sum of all the genetic material of the 100 trillion microbes that live in our GI tract alone. But we have bacteria throughout our body, including our brain and in our neurons. So we really need an expert to understand what bacteria have evolved with Homo sapiens, which ones should be supplemented, how they should be supplemented, and how they can really fortify our health to face all these challenges we have right now on a global scale.
Wow. This is one of the primary reasons I wanted you to be on, because there's really nobody that I know of that knows what you know about probiotics and the microbiome. There are people studying the microbiome, but they don't really understand probiotics. And learning from you and some of my research, it is so complex. This is what we don't know yet, and it can be, we don't even know all of this, the thought of the different probiotics they're using to treat people with, whether they're effective, whether what's in the probiotic is even in the probiotic. I mean, it's like you're up against all this marketing. And then there's the soil bacteria. So let's kind of break that apart. Let's first talk about I know one researcher has tested a lot of different probiotics, and she uses yours because she found that they didn't have in them what they said were in them. And so there's a lot of Silicon Valley investing in the probiotic companies, and there's just a lot of marketing. And what sets you apart from these people? Let's talk about that first.
Well, probiotics in simple terms is rocket science. It is not easy science, and you have to be extremely moral and ethical to do the right thing, because there are certain microorganisms that have evolved with Homo sapiens that are part of our life. And I'm very careful to choose microbes that have been in the literature for at least 100 years, have thousands of articles written about their safety, and that don't knock each other out. So if you use the wrong microorganisms together, then they will knock each other out, whether they're in the capsule or when they get inside of the GI tract. So there's a lot of misinformation. And the most important thing for people to take away from this, that the microbiota should never be taken lightly. It is a very serious thing. And probiotics should be safe at any level, and known to the person selling them that they can never cause harm. Because remember, they are one-celled brains, and they think and they don't behave because we want them to behave, or we have a marketing plan. And they can turn against us if we use the wrong ones to treat a symptom, and not knowing what can be down the road when we're not aware of it. Because unfortunately, medical science is totally uninformed about how powerful these microbes are, and that we are a hybrid of microbes and human cells. And since we replicate our whole body every year, understanding these microbes should be our major concern, because now the data coming out is reaffirming what I have stated decades ago, that is the microbiome that causes autoimmune disease, cancers, and all diseases identified us and then used to treat symptomatically and not holistically.
Yes, and so what you're up against is, since Natasha's very ethical. So what you're up against are companies that are trying to make as much money as they can off of these products. And as we know in the world, everybody's going for the cheapest ingredients and so forth. And so there are a lot of companies that are throwing a lot of money at the marketing and not at the research. They're not spending obviously not spending enough money on the research, and don't really care if they're producing a quality product. If there's I mean, the market's flooded with probiotics. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, well, first of all, I would say virtually 99% of them couldn't meet the probiotic labeling standard that was read into congressional record in 1994. And that's a simple thing for people to, spot. Number one, you have to use so-called microbes from safe genera, such as lactobacillus or bifidobacteria, period. People have resorted to using soil bacteria because they are stronger. They can give you quicker symptomatic relief, but anytime those microbes are allowed to overgrow, they will and can produce toxins that will harm the body in order to gain territorial control inside your GI tract or inside one of your organs or wherever in the body they may want to proliferate. So that's the danger of playing around with something that's so intelligent and that we think we understand. And we think that pretty packaging or sexy packaging is what we need to look at, because these manufacturers are not interested in educating you. They're interested in selling you the sizzle, telling you why their products can survive shelf life, telling tall tales, telling you that their so-called technology will survive stomach acid without any third-party validation. Claiming things that they shouldn't be claiming, because there's really no agency checking to see the ingredients. They're only interested in if you make claims of cures. If you make claims of potency, of viability, no agency right now that I know is even checking for that. So it's really consumer beware. And I can assure you, after having sat for 10 years on something called standards committees with the organization that was destroyed in order to eliminate something called the True Label Program. It's called the National Nutritional Foods Association. And they wanted that destroyed because they didn't want any standards. So it's really consumer beware. And so the things that I tell people to look at, first of all, what is the company's background? Are the actual researcher formulators and producers of that probiotic? Because it's like everybody telling you they can produce the space shuttle. Number two, do they know anything about how these probiotics really have effect on the body and have spent decades studying it? And number three, how many satisfied customers have they had? I have 20 million bottles sold of my my space shuttle product that I call, and my flagship product, Healthy Trinity. I have no complaints filed with any agency in the United States, in Canada, or anywhere where I've sold my products internationally for the last 44 years. That's an incredible record. And I'm of the belief that when you're selling natural substances, you must do no harm. And there's a great deal of confusion about fermented foods, how you should make them. There's terrible misinformation about the effectiveness of kombucha, and nobody really knows how dangerous that is. It's really an ignorant population that listens to the last sexy, player, a male or female, that gives him a 60-second shot and tells him this product is good. And the consumer has no true criteria to evaluate whether that's true or not.
So I want to talk to just a minute. I want to ask you something about the spore probiotics. So with the spore probiotics, tell me if I'm correct. You could take the spore probiotics and experience some relief from bloating and different GI issues, and then on down the road, all of a sudden you're getting sick in this area, and you're having an issue here and an issue here, and having all these new health issues that you didn't have before, and you go to the doctor and he doesn't know what it is. Could that be from having taken that spore probiotic for a long time?
Because there was research done, which I talk about, that, first of all, let's get this straight. Spore forming organisms are meant to live in the soil. Just to use common sense, your mother told you if you bring in stuff from the garden, she always told you to wash it, right? She didn't tell you to sit down and eat it. Why did she tell you to wash it? It's because the soil contains these organisms. And in minute amounts, they're not going to harm you, but taking billions of them is a very dangerous concept, because, first of all, they make a spore, which is a hard shell that can withstand well over 400 degrees Fahrenheit. And they only change their form, they're shapeshifters, if they see an opportunity. So the number one thing that could happen, you're taking a spore forming bacteria, and if it's in the spore form, it decides not to change its shape, or what we call sporulate. And so it just goes out with your feces, because 40% of your dry weight fecal matter are microbes. So it may just decide to go out. However, if it stays, remember, all bacteria are opportunistic. They look to dominate their territory. So these bacteria are opportunistic and waiting for an opportunity wherever they decide to land in your body to dominate that area. Once they start dominating, they start producing toxins to get rid of competition. However, those toxins can be also very detrimental to the human host. And that's where my problem begins, because it could take 2 years, it could take 3 years, you have no idea. And then the patient presents to the doctor with a problem. Western medicine will tell you, what's the symptom? Get the drug to treat the symptom, without knowing what the true cause of the symptom is.
So a person, so what, some of these spore probiotics, what are some of them, so that the people that maybe are taking them, at least they can look at their bottle and go, oh my gosh.
Yeah, well, one of the most favorite ones was Bacillus coagulans, which is probably the least dangerous. Then there's Bacillus subtilis, and there's other forms. I could go down a species. Unfortunately, when you look at the genus of Bacillus organisms, you also have a infamous cousin, which is called Bacillus anthracus. So
Oh.
that's down at the bottom where the most dangerous ones are found. So they're all related and they're all able to produce toxins at a certain level. So I don't want to go into a deep microbiological explanation because I'm going to lose half the people,
Right.
if not more. But basically, bacteria that are meant to be in the soil, if you see any organism that has B something or bacillus something, stay away from it because we don't have enough safety data. And like I said, a lot of people have consumed them. A lot of them have been ineffective, thank God, because I don't know how we would measure if they were effective and people start presenting with problems, how that would be taken. So I would say don't fool around with microbes and make sure you know the company, what their modus operandi. Most of these products are made in India. Some are made here in the States, and they should never be consumed in large quantities. And that's
Well,
based on my 55 years of experience.
how do you spell bacillus so that they can look
Um,
this up?
I'm trying to remember a Bcillus.
Okay, it's LLUS, bacillus. And so would people, a lot of people who are taking probiotics have issues, and a lot of their issues end up being autoimmune issues, and so they've got a weakened immune system.
Right.
So would this be one of the worst things those people could take?
Yeah, because we don't have any data that, see, real probiotic organisms like a Lactobacillus acidophilus communicates with your immune system to promote the function of killer cells, T cells, and that's good because it actually, all bacteria communicate with the immune system via photon light emission. So they're all trying to fool those immune cells that line your intestinal wall to try to get into your bloodstream because then they get a free ride to whatever location in the body they want to take advantage of. And so there's something that we call gates or tight junctures of the intestinal wall. And that's the mucosal lining is full of, immune cells trying to protect. And we have found the bacteria that I have chosen to use is that they communicate with the immune system to enforce protection of those tight junctures on the intestinal wall and to make sure that the immune system cells are functioning properly because they have a vested interest in keeping you healthy because they like to live in our body. You have to think that way. What is the reason that that organism wants to be in your body? Because it likes the territory and its primal objective in life is to create more of its kind. So when it's creating more of its kind, it all has to be beneficial to the human host. Otherwise, it becomes a problem.
Well, let's talk about, because I never know how long people are going to listen to this. So I want to talk about your probiotics and
Mm-hmm.
and at this point, give people your website or how they can get in touch with you. And then we'll go on because I want to talk about kombucha after we do this, to let people know how to get in touch with
Right.
you. What
Well,
you,
all I can tell you is that my family has producing liquid acidophilus in the mid 1960s up to the 90s, and I was the first one to introduce a freeze-dried Lactobacillus acidophilus as the official representative of the research of the University of Nebraska. It was a special strain that had incredible qualities and absolutely safe at any level for the human host. And for decades, the only organism the American public would buy was something that contained Lactobacillus acidophilus. Now, many companies, even in that era, were not selling that product because there was no check. There was no way to figure out if people were telling the truth or not. But the point is that I've done my research for the last 55 years and translated articles in the 1970s from the Academy of Sciences in St. Petersburg, from Bulgarian books, from European books. I have about 10,000 research articles on file on many of these beneficial organisms. And I've decided that number one, this organism evolved with Homo sapiens, is safe at any level, and has never been shown to do any harm in any literature. Right? But you have to grow these organisms in a way they like to grow. You have to stabilize them, and you have to protect them from heat. This whole business of shelf stable is a complete consumer lie, because when they talk about shelf stability, they're talking about 72 degrees Fahrenheit. There is no such temperature once you leave the warehouse. Even if the warehouse is not air conditioned, it can, in the southern half of the whole United States, temperatures for 9 months can reach 100 degrees or plus inside a UPS truck, inside of a dock. It's usually, if it's not marked perishable, it's left on a dock, either in the health food store or at the distributor level. So it's exposed to terrible, conditions. And then the consumer is told, oh, it's shelf stable. Well, maybe it's 72 degrees Fahrenheit, but when it's exposed to all of this, there's none of that alive. So the Lactobacillus acidophilus, remember, is the primary, inhabits the small intestinal tract because that's where it loves to live. It's found in all the reproductive tracts of both females and males. It's, found in brain cells. It's found throughout the body. It's one of the most important microbes you can consume for your health. So the second organism that I was the first to introduce was called Bifidobacteria. Now, Japanese and German researchers were the first ones to really start writing about this in the late 1970s. And this bacteria is extremely important for the large intestine, which has the colon part of it. So the colon is part of the large intestine. Now, the reason these Bifidobacteria will live in the large intestine is because it's free of oxygen. So this Bifidobacteria is important for our immune function as well, but it's important because it's our waste and disposal system monitor, making sure that all the toxins leave the body via the feces and they're not returned to the liver for detoxification. That's an extremely important process. And so nobody knew what the heck I was talking about for decades. And then the third bacteria introduces one of the major bacteria that's part of a yogurt starter. Remember, each starter culture is synonymous with the product it produces. In other words, you have special starter cultures for yogurt, special starter cultures for kefir, special starter cultures for the various cheeses. And each one of them has a standard, because if you don't use the right bacteria, you can't call it a yogurt, and you can't call it a kefir, and you can't call it a cheese like gorgonzola or whatever. You have to have the bacteria to let us identify as the finished product to be called something, because it's that bacteria that we identify making that product that we consume. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So the Lactobacillus bulgaricus was studied at the turn of the 20th century by a famous Russian scientist and doctor by the name of Dr. Ilya Mechnikov, who was a fellow at the Pasteur Institute. And he wrote the first book on longevity. And the reason he named it Lactobacillus bulgaricus is he found the long-lived Bulgarians who consumed their Bulgarian yogurt had a rich and long-lived lives without disease. And so this bacteria is unique because it's one of the very few that can actually help you pre-digest the food, which is very important for that molecular size of the food. Trying to pass your intestinal wall doesn't cause a reaction from the immune cells. Secondly, it has profound influence on promoting the growth of killer and T cells. It has a tremendous ability to stimulate peristalsis, to move the food along so you don't experience constipation, because if the food doesn't move along the intestinal wall, you will get backup or constipation, which is really quite dangerous thing, which most people don't realize. So those are the three bacteria I chose because it's based on human use, safe use, and affinity for keeping the human host healthy. And the fourth bacteria that I introduced was a Bifidobacteria infantis. Again, I was the first one to introduce it. It is the only bacteria that certain components of breast milk can stimulate. And unfortunately for us in North America, and this is 20-year-old research, I've been trying desperately to find new research, but the 20-year-old research tells us that only 7% of mothers in North America, even if they give vaginal birth and breastfeed their children, can pass along this essential bacteria called Bifidobacteria infantis to their infants. And I'm guessing that that's why we have so many problems with children, because this bacteria is one of the very few, or maybe the only one, that can help the immune system upregulate and downregulate. Because it's very important for the immune system to develop a tolerance to know the difference between food going across the intestinal wall and something it perceives to be a predator. So that's what's so important and what we're missing in Western culture.
Could that have the lack of bifidobacterium in children have to do with the autism epidemic?
That's one of the reasons that the Bifidobacteria infantis is not passed along by the mother. In fact, they found now, autism is a complex problem, but and that's why I said everybody's trying to give you a magic fix. There's no magic fix, but we do know that along 2 generations down both the father's and the mother's line, remember, the child gets both their microbiome from both parents, not just from the mother. So if you have a history, let's say in the mother's family, of irritable bowel syndrome, of problems with digestion, in the 3rd or 4th generation, it's going to show up as some kind of a problem, either a dysfunction between the communication with the brain or something else that's wrong in the body neurologically, but it's going to manifest. It's going to manifest, and then they blame genetics. Well, genetics are plans, and the plans don't get turned on and off unless there's either bacteria that's producing toxins, or the human being is ingesting toxins, or your perception of reality. Remember, genes only get switched on by those 3 things. So the microbiome then becomes the most important thing that we get from both set of parents. And because we have so many toxins in our food source, this is what I believe is causing this explosion of children being unable to think, unable to socialize, and have huge neurological problems.
Wow, that makes total sense.
Mm.
Well, let's move on to, I want to talk about, I want people to understand about kombucha, because so many people love kombucha, and I'll talk to people and they'll say, oh, well, I'm taking kombucha for my gut. And I would like for people to know the truth about kombucha, since
Yeah.
it's very popular.
Right. Well, kombucha was started like a, urban legend about 3 or 4 decades ago. And I keep telling people, you made this mistake with soy milk. Remember, soy milk was selling like hotcakes. In fact, I used to argue with my friend Sandy Gooch for allowing soy milk to be sold in Mrs. Gooch's health food stores that eventually evolved into Whole Foods. That's a whole nother segment. And sure enough, I was right, because then they found out the large consumption of soy milk predisposed the body to think it was getting extra estrogen supplementation, and it led to disease. Because I said, look at the culture. In Japan, they drank soy milk in small amounts as a treat once a week, either 6 to 8 ounces. They in no way consumed this product on a daily basis, drinking 16 or more ounces a day. Are you here?
Yeah, I am here. Or something, I don't know what's going on. It glitched on us, but
Okay. So did you get my last statement about
no,
the
but
kind of,
they were drinking, the Japanese were drinking small amounts, like once a week, a small glass once a week. And then in the United States, they ended up just drinking gallons of it.
yeah. And then they found out, it, stimulates or mimics estrogen supplementation. And we got a big problem. We started getting people that were not feeling so good, having problems. It's the same thing with kombucha. Kombucha is a tea that was made by certain families in Asian countries as a medicine, not as a substance to drink. It was, handled by certain families. And what makes kombucha ferment is the use of a brewer's yeast along with the bacterium that produces cellulose. Now, we have no idea what the production of cellulose can do in our body on long term. So when these medicinal teas were given, they were given to small amounts by families who had generational experience giving these teas to people, and then it was used to cure a disease. It was not a beverage they consumed for enjoyment every day. So unfortunately, what happened in the United States, they figured out they couldn't make a lot of money selling this as a medicinal tea. So they made it into a drink and told everybody the more they drank of this, the better they were going to feel. And I was horrified because it came from the belief from the health food industry that yeast is the cause of many diseases because yeast is pleomorphic, meaning it changes shapes. And it can, when it gets into its mold state inside your body, it can actually grow projectiles, make holes in your intestinal wall, and cause a host of problems. So here we are consuming a product that has that has a yeast used to brew beer. Shouldn't call it brewer's yeast. They have yeast to brew beer, and they have a bacterium which we know nothing about, really. So they're consuming this in large amounts. There's no standard, that I know that any state is enforcing. So anybody, they'll be visited maybe by the health department, but there's no quality assurance as to what the starter culture is, if it's contaminated, what percentage is in the finished product, and they sweetened it on top of that. So if you can imagine having a yeast product that you add a sweetener, I don't care what sweetener you use, you're adding a carbohydrate source with the yeast, which will stimulate its growth once inside your body.
Yeah,
So to me, it's completely crazy, completely crazy.
it made me very sick. I started making it once and drinking it. It tasted really effervescent and good. And then I started getting really sick. I mean, started having really flu-like symptoms. And finally I thought, well, it kept getting worse and worse and worse. And I thought, I'm going to stop drinking this and see if that helps. And yes, it immediately helped. Like
Yeah,
within
and I think there's so many compromised people in this country. I think they've completely lost common sense when they're doing this, because Americans think that anything they think is good for them, large amounts would be better.
more the better. Yes, that's true.
And it's the thing is, even if you present to a medical doctor, they have no idea what your autoimmune disease was caused by or what can happen. We just don't know. And when we don't know, this is not a drink. It's probably even worse than, I would say, soda, drinking regular soda, because you're dealing with live microbes that you have no control as to what this relationship between this bacteria and yeast is in this drink that was used as a medicine in Asia that we're consuming on a large basis where there's no government standard, state or federal wise. They just say you have to have the Scooby starter. And then what really keeps me up at night, these crazy people who pass this among each other, who have no idea, they have no microbiological background, they don't even have standard sanitary conditions in their kitchen, so they don't even know what they're growing there. This is what is so scary. And since we have such a large amounts of chronically ill people, this is like the worst idea for any kind of a health concept.
It could be, we don't know. I mean, Kennedy is supposedly researching all of these things causing, but a lot of these things can be causing it. And all these people are eating things that their ancestors never ate. They're trying all of these new things from all over the world. And I mean, this could be playing a big role in some of the health issues that we're having.
Of course, because our genetic makeup of our composition of the microbes is not geared to handle this. And that's what I tell people. What we've done in this country, we've killed the two staples. If you're from Europe or a background from the United States of European descent, the staples were bread and milk. What did we do? we adulterated the milk and we adulterated the bread. So nobody can eat these staples. I know my Macedonian and my Serbian grandmother, what did they have for dinner? Yogurt and bread. That was the staple. My mother never heard of half the diseases when she came here, and that was in the mid 1950s.
They ate
So
food from their gardens and
yeah, I
um,
mean they went to the open market, the piazza, every morning to get the fresh vegetables that the farmers picked at 3 o'clock in the morning and brought fresh around 6 o'clock in the morning. You would choose the vegetables that were in season. They knew who produced their eggs. They knew who made their milk. They were very picky. And that's why people were healthy. And they walked a lot in open air. There wasn't this pollution we have now. So what we've done is we've separated ourselves from the food source. We've chosen to buy things from people who don't know, don't come from that culture, have no idea what the downside may be of something, especially if it was used as a medicine. And we just go along until boom, there's some kind of a great crisis that opens, somebody reveals it, and all of a sudden you see empty shelves. Well, that's not a way to, try to bring the health of a nation up.
oh. Well, I want one other thing about the supplements about probiotics. A lot of people like it. They'll read it has all these different strains, they'll tout all the different strains in the probiotic supplement. And I know that you mentioned that, but if we could just go a little bit into detail about
Yeah.
how that's what that does when they put all those strains in a capsule or in a bottle.
Right. Well, that's not meant to help you, the consumer. That's to allow the white label manufacturers, which 99% of the companies use, to produce thousands of different products that supposedly are different. And what that is about is that they throw all these different strains together in one capsule. Remember, the primary state of microbes is competitive exclusion. So now you're allowing these bacteria to touch each other, and most of them will die, will become inactive because they don't want to waste cellular energy. And others will literally produce substances to knock each other off. So when you consume that product, you're probably getting one or at the most of two organisms, and they're the least effective because they were programmed to produce larger counts so that if somebody takes a plate count, they can set, because once you mix up all these bacteria, it's a very expensive and tedious method to find out what you actually have in there. Second of all, the labeling standard says if you put any microbe in a probiotic product, that microbe, so each bacteria that you put in there, the potency has to be guaranteed to an expiry date. If you just give a total count, it's meaningless, because the reason those products don't work, because you have no idea, A, if the bacteria are synergistic, let alone symbiotic. B, you don't even know what's in the product by the time you take it. And if the product's been abused by lack of proper handling, it's not in glass, it's in plastic. We don't even know if microplastics are in there. What the heck you're swallowing, I have no idea. So you need to know who the manufacturer is. And the minute people don't guarantee each bacteria that's in that product, stay away from it. Absolutely stay away from it, because, either it's not in there, you're just being fooled, or you're taking a chance. You have no idea what's really effective in that product. And it was made so that these bulk manufacturers can just change the name of microbes on the label and sell thousands of different varieties with no scientific backing.
Thank you. I think that's very important for people to know. Also, I would like to stop for a second and say that I don't think we talked about where you could get the products, because
Right.
Natasha's products, they come to you, they're shipped chilled, they have to stay chilled, and then you put them in your refrigerator so that you're guaranteed these active cultures. And I will tell you the difference between taking her products and other products is night and day difference. I have been
Right.
very, very ill. I was very with an autoimmune condition, affected my GI tract. I had terrible IBS, and I don't have IBS anymore. I don't have any symptoms of IBS anymore. And I take her Trenev Duo, and I take the Superdophilus.
Yeah.
So those are the two that I take that I've worked up
Right.
to being able to take, and I had to work up to taking them, but they are very powerful. So you can get them. She has her main company, which is Natron.
Yes.
And
Natron, it's, you can go to www.natron, which spells NATREN.com, or you can still call us. I have women that work in the, we call them probiotic specialists because one's been with me for 28 years, another one's been with me for 22 years. They've all been with me for more than a decade. And they love their job because they're not salespeople. They're there really to help you decide what is the best protocol for you to use for your certain health concern. And remember, we're not treating symptoms. We are trying to change an ecosystem to give your body the ability to heal itself. So if you want to talk to Susan, Carolyn, or Faye, then call 866, the number 4, and the word natron spelled out, which is NATREN. And then just look for Consumer Direct, and they'll be happy to help you. I know Robin went through our professional division, which is called ProTren, but you can call Natron and ask for the professional division, and all the people there will be very happy to help you. And knock on wood, for 44 years, I have never had any complaints filed against me with any agency, nor has anybody gotten sick taking my products. And by the way, we only package in dark colored glass with tin lids. We don't even use plastic for our lids. We avoid using any materials except in our thermally controlled packaging to keep the bacteria alive and unharmed. Some people are playing games. They're using a different way to count bacteria, which is not an accepted way. It's used internally for people who produce these products. And then they're advertising it on their website as being the way to count bacteria, which is not true. And they package it in pretty boxes and pretty pouches. They send you pretty glass containers. But I say to people, most Americans have forgotten the basic rules of sanitation. If you get a jar where you load in probiotic bacteria capsules, people put their fingers in that jar. They don't realize every time you touch the inside of a jar, you leave a microbial footprint. Those bacteria will stay in there. And if you take your probiotic capsules from that jar and you never change it, you never clean it, that accumulation will have an effect on the probiotic that you're taking from your pouch, pouring in this jar, and keep taking this product. And people just don't think. And that's the problem because we've lost connection with natural sanitary habits that used to be taught by mothers in the 50s and in the 60s. And it sort of started dying off with what I call the microwave generations. They just have no standard of any sanitation. So, the big companies, like we said, they're getting money in from Silicon Valley. They don't own any production facility. 90% of the money is spent on the marketing, on making pretty symbols, alluding to scientific articles, paying scientists to endorse their product. And it's a tragedy because the situation is very serious in our country. I've lived here for, many years. As I said, I'm 77 years old. I have never seen so many chronically ill children, teenagers, adults. We're now seeing colon cancer in 8, 9, 11-year-olds. I mean, I don't know how more serious the situation has to be before we start waking up, because the onus is on us. We're so busy being busy,
right.
and we don't have enough people in our industry left that really care about what they sell.
That's in every industry. Well, now let's move from there. This is a great transition place to, okay, so we already had a situation where people were, the chronic disease epidemic was already happening. And then comes COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And then comes the COVID vaccinations, or the jabs, as
Yeah.
some people call them. And now everything has just skyrocketed. And I've experienced long COVID. I've gotten very light case of COVID, but then I've experienced a long COVID, and this has to do with my gut situation and permeated gut and everything. I do understand a bit of that. And so let's talk because the probiotics are what I'm taking. I'm taking the bifidobacterium, a very high dose of bifidobacterium and longum, which Natasha formulated for such things as this. And this is what's helped me more than anything to stop having all those horrible kind of flu-like weird bad
Yeah.
symptoms that and heightened reactions to everything that I got after getting COVID. And this is, it's 8 months since I had the COVID, and this
Right.
is helping me significantly. So let's talk about COVID, and let's talk about how the probiotics can help with recovering from long COVID and even vaccine injuries.
Yes. Well, it wasn't my research, but there's a research that's very telling. And the problem is that journals accept for publication, then they change their mind. They don't publish this thing. So that doesn't mean that it's not true. It's probably damaging a profit structure. So what we know, and we know that at least 1,000 doctors have reviewed this and agree that if you've had long haul COVID, you've lost all of your bifidobacteria in your large intestine. If you've had vaccines that contain the spike protein, because the spike protein literally chews up these beneficial bacteria, so they're gone. That means your immune system is gone. So that's why you have such a terrible problem with people who are exposed to the spike protein, because we know it damages immunity, and the research shows that it destroys the bifidobacteria in the large intestine. My view is that it also destroys lactobacilli in your small intestine. And I think that people who have had this become chronically ill because your immune system has been triggered to react to everything now because there's so much pollution in the air. Microplastics is only one of them. The vaccines is a huge, big problem in its own. And now I'm hearing serious feedback that people are having sore throat-like symptoms. They're coughing, they have ear aches, they're inhaling something that's causing these problems. We still don't know what it is, but whatever it is, it's causing people to have chronic reactions. And we know that number one, if they've had COVID or they've taken the vaccines, they must take an effective bifidobacteria product to restore the bifidobacteria in their large intestine. That's number one. And it's my personal view that you should take more bacteria, especially for the small intestine, because I think there's been damage there. And we cannot restore the function of our immune system unless we have the right probiotics, because remember, the correct bacteria will signal immune function and stimulate appropriate immune function wherever the defense of the body is necessary. And that's without getting too technical. So I think we have a nation in decline. I think, Bobby Kennedy's trying to stop the chemicals in the food, but we have as much of a problem in the dietary supplement industry because everybody's pushing their business. And sometimes even on the research side, people are interested in only presenting their point of view because it's a matter of control. And it's a sad thing about our society, and that everybody wants to control. And all I can tell people, I chose to be here. I don't have to be here, but I see as a veteran of this health food industry, there's almost nobody left like me. Either people have died or they've sold their companies. And that's to me a huge challenge because we have bigger problems than I've ever seen in my lifespan, especially in this country. And I don't think people take it seriously enough.
I don't think they're taking, I think that people are in denial a lot about it. And, you were the one who told me about this.
Yeah.
And he explains a lot of it, especially with how COVID affects the brain and kind of the numbing.
And the vaccines, he talks about it openly. Yes, I listened to him. You can catch his interview. It's an older interview with Tucker Carlson. His name is Dr. Michael Niels. And I was completely fascinated by him because he's not only a medical doctor, he's a PhD in neurology. And he has stated that the spike protein literally diminishes the size of your hippocampus, and that people who have had the shots cannot think critically nor want to have in-depth conversations. And he noted that when he was having conversations with his colleagues at receptions, nobody wanted to have an in-depth conversation. It's like they lost interest in talking about, things that were more scientific or intense or required some higher capacity thinking. And that scared the heck out of me. I said, oh, wow. So not only is now your gut being attacked, now your brain cells are actually being attacked. And that means we're going to have a public of sheep that are just going to say yes to everything. Because if we can't think critically, we can't assess what is good or bad. And that to me is a critical problem. I see it with young children. They're disinterested. The sad thing is that in Silicon Valley, they don't give their children iPhones or iPads until they're 13, 14, or 15 years old. And in the inner schools, they give this stuff away free for the children. And I said, wait a minute. If you're not giving this to your children, why are you giving this to the school? Why aren't the kids taught the mind-hand connection of writing, of reading? It is so crucial. I mean, I can't believe now, first of all, we're giving them stuff that reduces your capacity to think, and then we're not allowing them to think by not teaching them how to think.
And they don't write cursive. Now that kids don't learn
Yeah.
cursive writing, there's something about the cursive writing. It's the the hand brain.
Right, right. So, as I said, I'm not here marketing. This is not an infomercial. I'm here because I want to help people. I exceptionally want to help children. I'm trying to deal with various autism groups. I'll tell you, I've spent thousands of my dollars of my own money trying to develop protocols, and there's such a hardcore resistance in the autism community. Everybody's listening to science, but I said, okay, so if you're listening to what you've listened to so far, how come the numbers are not getting better? That's my question. How come the numbers? I said, you need to have a protocol to help the gut first. Then you have to find other protocol that's conducive to each child that needs to be utilized for the child to get better. And the more we start using effective protocols together, the better we can do this. And we also have to make an intense campaign to change the health of the mothers, because that's causing more children
Right,
to be,
right.
born autistic, or to have a problem. Because if you don't have a resilience and you're given a lot of vaccines at one time, your body can't take it. I don't care, this is ridiculous. You're pro-vax, you're anti-vax. I'm against something being used in the body that the body can't handle. That's what I'm against. So whether you're pro-vax, anti-vax, it means meaningless. What you need to do is establish the criteria. Does that vaccine have carriers such as aluminum or mercury? And especially if we found out that in boys, under 18 months, they're more affected than girls. We have to be able to share this information. And, so much incredibly false information is handed out that nobody knows what to think anymore.
Right. It's so confusing. And that's why what I'm doing with the articles for the Canadian magazine and the podcasts I'm trying to find people who stand on really solid science, people of integrity. And I consider myself that way. I'm not in this for the money because I'm not making money doing it. And I'm trying to make money with my Enliven Foods business. But even that product is a much higher quality product. The mug muffin meals and the different products we're making, they're made from whole plant foods. They're ground, it's dried and ground. That's not the best. The best is if you go eat those whole plant foods fresh and you prepare them fresh. But if you're going to eat a white bread muffin, white flour muffin, and you compare it, you eat ours, which is like made from, whole foods, dried and ground. It's much better, and it's got legumes in it and stuff. But anyway,
Yeah.
so with the COVID, do you recommend, if people have long COVID or they've got some vaccine injuries, do you recommend the Trenev Duo?
Yes, I do. But remember, you can call Natron, but the Natron reps are allowed to sell our professional product, which is the Trenev Duo that
How
I've
would we
created
get that?
specifically. They can buy the Lifestart 2. And I also encourage them to buy the Trenev Trio or the retail label, which is Healthy Trinity, because it's a combination of things. Remember, you've got a lot of microbiomes through your body. You have one in your brain, you've got one in your gut, you have one on your skin, you have one in your organs, especially your reproductive organs. That's a whole nother interview. The infertility we're seeing among the young, the reduction of sperm count by 50%. And believe it, acidophilus sometimes floats along with the sperm. That's a fascinating topic in itself. Women don't have healthy vaginal tracts because they're buying products that don't really take care of the problem. And this is what there's a great deal of confusion. The prettier the packaging and the sexier the website, the more the young people buy it. And the situation is just way too serious for that kind of nonsense. I do have a specialized product for, vaginal health. It's called the Natron Probiotic Ultimate Support for Vaginal Health. And that original product was tested in a Yale nursing school on HIV positive women in the 1980s. And our product was number one, safe. They used it at the third of the recommended dose, and we still did as well as the drug, which is metronidazole. So the whole point of these products is to make them completely safe and then to make them effective. So we have the range of products that will affect your skin, that will affect your immunity, that will affect your digestive tract. I've spent a lifetime, learning how to grow these organisms to make sure they're safe, that they're effective, and that people get results. And especially, I'm concerned about the people who have been exposed to COVID, to the spike protein, because we are already in a weakened state. We were not a healthy nation. And then to be exposed to something else like this,
Right.
it's a disaster. In my humble opinion, it is a total disaster.
Now we're seeing the mortality rate is just, going up. Well, so can people purchase the Trenev Duo?
Yes, they can purchase that through the Natron consultant. They're allowed to sell it. And I've made that available because I want everybody to have access to the products. It's like I said, the times are too serious.
Wow.
And we really have to be cognizant that people need help.
And if you'll explain, because people are going to look at that, they're going to, well, there are 3 strains, or there are 2 strains in here, and she says they can't be mixed together. Would you
Okay.
explain why
Yes.
yours it works?
Okay. So I'm the only one in the world that micro-enrobes these strains in oil. And oil, when you micro-enrobe an organism in oil, it's kept separate. I don't know if you've ever had oil. When you oil something, it's mean to keep that surface separate. So these bacteria are micro-enrobed in special oil that we use special treatments to take out the water, because believe it or not, oil has water. So then this oil with the micro-enrobed microorganism, we have a special machine custom made for us, then puts this oil matrix in a 2-piece hard gel capsule. Why do I use 2-piece hard gel capsule? Because unfortunately, the vegetarian capsule is made from compounds that are chemically produced. It may be a vegetarian source, but it's uses compound that's medically produced and not conducive to keeping the potency of these microorganisms in the oil. So I use gelatin, I use natural coloring, and it is a very complex procedure. But none of the bacteria are able to touch each other in the capsule. And I have third-party validation from a famous institute in Germany that our 3 strains will survive stomach acid as low as 1.8 pH for well over an hour. And then all of our strains are bioresistant. So when the oil is emulsified by the bile in the smaller intestine, the organisms are not harmed. So every step of processing the organisms, of encapsulating them, of shipping them, of testing them for survival in the stomach with a low pH, of survival with bile, everything has been tested. So when the organisms come into your small intestine, they're incentivized to work for you. All of our products are still unique, and there's nothing like it in the entire world because the processing is very complex, takes a lot of dedication, and takes a lot of money to achieve.
Yeah, they're really quite amazing. So one of the things, so we've talked about COVID and how this can help. Now let's talk about a little bit. Let's tell people if you can explain gut dysbiosis, and then the leaky gut, permeated gut lining, and how pathogens are, getting into the bloodstream, and how the probiotics can help reverse these common things, and what is causing this is a lot, what's causing the dysbiosis and the leaky gut, some of the causes. I know there are many.
Right. Well, first of all, people don't understand basics.
Okay.
Your a pipeline, which is the digestive tract, starts at the mouth and ends at the other end. It is a processing tube, to take in food. And, first of all, the breakdown starts in your mouth. It goes down your esophagus, in your stomach. And the stomach is supposed to secrete acid, very low pH acid, to break down proteins and to kill bacteria. Most people don't know how magnificent this design is. I'm always, inspired when I have to talk about this, because the stomach acid kills the bacteria, which are 99% proteins, and they digest the proteins in our food. That's why this whole craze with Ozempic, where it slows down your digestion and the emptying of the stomach, is such a huge problem, and it will come back to bite us. That's another topic for another interview. So it's very important that this food then gets broken down and digested, and then there's a little mechanism, a flap from the stomach into the small intestine that opens and then dumps the food into the small intestine, where bile is formed and oils are emulsified so they can be absorbed and digested further. And then carbohydrate digestion happens in the small intestine, where the carbs are broken down. And then what happens is this food now that's been acted on by the stomach, by the bile duct, and by enzymes in the small intestine is broken down, and then it's pushed by muscles in your intestinal tract through 20 feet in the small intestine for absorption to take place. And this absorption is supposed to nourish the body without affecting the immune system. Remember, the immune system is guarding. The immune system, if you think of the immune system as a scanner and the food coming in as QR codes. So whenever the immune system sees the wrong QR code, they said, oh, alert, we got something trying to come in across the intestinal wall that can harm the body, get a reaction. So that's when you see your food sensitivity that doesn't get addressed, and then becomes a food allergy. And we just think that's a nuisance. No, that's a big warning. Your food is not being absorbed, because that food that's being absorbed through the small intestine is necessary to rebuild your body every year. Okay, and it needs good quality proteins. Cheap proteins will produce disease. So now when that digestive process, then you go down the small intestine, the 20 feet, and remember, it's always a squeezing motion, pushing it forward. When it gets down to the ileocecal valve, there's another valve at the end of the ileum, which is a small part of the intestine, then allows the food to be dumped into the large intestine, where all the bifidobacteria are. That's for final digestive process, where water is absorbed or some nutrients, and then the elimination is formed. And hopefully, if you have the right amount of bifidobacteria, no toxins are sent back to the liver for detoxification. That's why people who have healthy counts of bifidobacteria don't experience liver problems. And then the optimal transit time of that food passing from the mouth to the other end should be no more than 24 hours. Okay. Now, while your food is being processed, what causes dysbiosis? It's a catch-all term that means whatever you've done, your emotional condition, your stress level, your poor choice of foods is causing the 100 trillion microbes to become disunified. Disunified meaning that the ones that are not so friendly are now starting to dominate certain areas of your stomach, certain areas of your intestinal tract. And that causes the bloating, because remember, you produce gas every day. You just don't hear it and see it. That's normal. But when you start having abnormal bloating and gas production, that means that there is a disruption in the normal composition. And then the medical community just throws in a term like it's dysbiosis, meaning this process this brilliant process I just explained to you, something is off. Somewhere there's colonies of bacteria overgrowing and causing problems in this flow of digestion that needs to nourish your body. Either the immune system is overreacting, or the gates on the intestinal wall are not strong enough. Things are getting into the bloodstream that are causing the immune system to go nuts. So that's the catch-all term we call dysbiosis. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And then
Okay.
so the permeated gut where the tight junctions, one of the things that I've described, tell me if this is correct, is that when you get the gut inflammation, you get the bloating and you get inflammation in the gut. So you've got tight junctions like this, but if you get inflammation, then it expands and makes the holes bigger. Is that correct or not?
Yeah, it can. It can. Because remember, first, let's understand they're called tight junctures. They're like gates and they're closed like this. In order for them to open to allow nourishment, everybody has to agree. The probiotics, the immune system has to agree that that's okay for the host to, take that into the bloodstream. Okay. So when there's a lack of agreement, what the immune system does and what is inflammation, it destroys what it perceives to be defective cells. The destruction of those cells causes heat, okay? Generates heat. That heat we call, by a catch-all phrase, inflammation. So the immune system is continuing to destroy what it considers defective cells, and we're using the term inflammation to describe it. So the immune system is overreacting. And remember, if you have the right probiotic strains, they help to downregulate or upregulate. Downregulate means telling the immune system, calm down. It's only food getting into the body. You're overreacting. Some pathogen is sending you false signals to overreact you because they want you distracted because they want to take over territory over here. The other thing that can cause inflammation is the bad bacteria producing toxic material that then causes the immune system to destroy those cells that have been infected by the toxic material.
Well, there's something that I experience and I've experienced since I've taken your probiotics. And I had to weather the storm. When I first started taking the bifidobacterium, I was very scared of it because my body reacted. So I started off and immediately I started getting a reaction like I normally get. And which mine was with the esophagus and the lower gut at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And I read a lot of stuff and I thought, and I kept taking little tiny amounts. And finally I started increasing it. And I thought, this is the battle, because I learned about it after studying. This is the battle going on inside. I'm introducing the good bacteria now in, and it's threatening the other bacteria. And there's a war going on. And I just have to weather the storm. And I think people need to understand this. And it never took more than 3 days. There would be all kinds of things, rumbling going on and gas and some cramping, and the esophagus was complaining and hurting and burning. And then after 3 days, things began to settle down.
Yeah, it's a war. It's a
And
war for control.
people need to understand this. So,
Yeah.
because if people who are very reactive and sensitive, and they take the probiotic and, oh my gosh, I'm starting to have reactions. Well, yes, give it 3 days. If
Yeah.
it, and give it 3 days, and it's probably it's going to settle down, and you're going to, that skirmish will have been won.
Yeah, and the reason you do that is because the system has to adjust, and that's why I say if you have esophageal problem, you don't take the bifidobacteria first because they're not going to stay there, and you take the lactobacillus acidophilus. In the retail version, it's called megadophilus. In the ProTrend label, it's called superdophilus, and all of the. That's why I still have live people there because it is a complex issue, and most people are ignorant. So the thing that we call an adverse event is what I call a healing crisis. If you use the right bacteria, the body will go in through a healing crisis. And sometimes we just make much smaller doses more frequently, so that because people in the West are always taught everything that changes in the body is for the worse.
Right,
You have to
right.
learn that there's something that the body, it's like the only explanation I can give you that's somewhat similar as when the body raises the temperature. It always raises the temperature where we feel a great deal of discomfort because it's trying to kill something. When you get a fever, it's your body trying to kill something. And most people never get that explained to them. That fevers is a one defense the immune system
Yeah.
causes. And that's why after you have a cold and you have fever, you get so hungry because now the body's expanded so much energy trying to defend itself from whatever is going on. And again, this is never taught.
No,
Doctors
instead
just,
they take Tylenol.
yeah,
They give Tylenols to kill the fever, which is what's going to be part of the healing.
yeah. Well, most people in the West don't understand. And
They-
yes, fevers are higher than 106 have to be dealt with,
Right, of course.
because it can become dangerous. So it's again the lack of holistic knowledge. It's only knowledge that is meant to handle a symptom and not really understanding that the body has an ecosystem that needs to be optimally balanced in order for the body to function correctly. And stress, I can tell you, the chemicals that stress alone produces, if you put it in the petri dish and you put human cells or you put the beneficial bacteria in there, it's going to kill it. Stress produces such horrible chemicals, you have no idea. And of course, that's going to cause more inflammation because remember, inflammation is the destructive process of the immune system to destroy what it perceives to be defective.
It's interesting. What is this? When I take my probiotics, and I take them every day, when I take them, I get a very mild flare up, and then everything quiets down.
It means there's still something there that it's, a battle.
Yeah.
Battle's going on for territory control. It's the best way to, if you know about people who are territorial, bacteria are territorial. And so, giving up their territory, and eventually that will go away, again, depending on your ability to heal. And it depending on your perception of reality. How do you view reality? Are you grateful every morning you get up? Are you a cheerful, nice person? Or are you always in a bad mood and cursing everything? Believe me, I'll tell you a true story. In the fermentation field, when we make yogurts or other things, when the person who dumps the culture in the tanks goes on vacation, we're very careful who we hire to put the culture in if it's not input mechanically. Because if it's a person who's always in a bad mood or not happy, your culture can take double the time to take, if you can believe that.
I believe it. Well, I'll
So
tell you. Well, go ahead.
yeah,
Sorry.
so your perception of reality either makes you a good or a bad host for these beneficial bacteria. The pathogens will adopt to anything because they have a different, mindset. But the probiotic bacteria will not stay in a person's gut who's constantly negative.
Certainly read that. Well, I'll tell you something that happened to me the other night that's very interesting. I was, which I'll go into the itch thing, but I've had a lot of things happen. And just to let you, I grew up in an abuse. I came from an abusive family. My parents were social alcoholics, and there was a lot of neglect and so forth. And my mother had mental health issues, and so she was very emotionally she tortured. Especially, I was the scapegoat in the
Yeah.
family. So I've got emotionally tortured a lot. So that was the patterning that I grew up with. And I'm not saying anything against my mother anymore. I forgive her. She had her own demons she had to deal with.
Yeah.
But those were the patterns that were established from the time I was a very small child all the way up. And I was, really struggling with this insect situation that we have and the itching and pain that I was experiencing. And I was praying, and I was praying that God would show me what it is that I'm doing that's blocking my own healing, because I noticed that that my healing was being blocked all the time. And I went to sleep. I woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning to these words: internalized abuse. I mean, I woke up to hearing those words in my mind, internalized abuse. So I go to AI and I look up internalized abuse. And I did it in the night. And it was internalized self-abuse. And it goes into the whole autoimmune thing and everything. It says that people that come from abusive backgrounds, and there are a lot of people out there that come from that, differing degrees, and that they are more susceptible to autoimmune diseases. I mean, a high percentage of these people, gave all the percentages. And it says that what these people do is they establish these patterns, the patterns of abuse that they experience with their families. Once they get out of that family, that's why a lot of us will go to an abusive relationship or so forth. And I've gotten completely out of it. I live in a pastoral setting out in the country. There's only peace. There's nothing here. But that I have created internally my own, because it's familiar. What you grow up with and those patterns that you're given are familiar. And actually, that's how you interpret love, because that was what you got back then. And
That's right.
so it's all comfortable and familiar. And that my system, since I'm in a completely peaceful environment, no chaos, no animosity, my internal, and that's when all of this kind of started. Internally, my system, because it wants everything to be familiar the way it thinks it's supposed to be, is creating the chaos internally and not allowing me to heal. And I saw this very clearly. What to do with it, I don't know yet, other than just pray, because it just was the other night. But I think a lot
You
of,
have to forgive.
yes, I have completely forgiven my parents, because really, in many ways, they were very wonderful people. My mother was a lovely, lovely person, but she had been abused herself. And so anyway, I have forgiven them, but it's even goes, it's deeper. It's, you have to forgive yourself, because when we are abused at a young age, we are those are if our caregivers are abusive to us, those are the people that provide us, that keep us alive. We can't take
Yeah.
care of ourselves at that point. So you cannot blame the caregiver who's keeping you alive. You're dependent on them. So you internalize and blame yourself for the abuse. That's just naturally what a child will do. They'll blame themselves for the abuse.
Mhm.
And then we grow up blaming ourselves, and then we have this, it's a whole punishing thing that we're doing. It's a very complex thing, but I see how powerful it is, and I see how it runs the show, and how important parenting is. Oh my gosh. I mean, this is extremely important. The environment you raise that child in, and those patterns that are established
Yeah.
when they're very young.
Remember, your subconscious is set within the first 7 years. And that's really the operating system we run by. And yes, I mean, I tell this people from a spiritual point of view, because the bacteria do react to your moods, believe me. And, Western civilization has taught us that everything works in a void. No. And I tell people, wake up and spend the first 3 minutes thanking God or whatever, whoever you want to thank, for your home, for your life, for your body, for your ability to experience joy that day. And compassion is one of the biggest things that we need to learn. Because according to Tibetan philosophy, compassion is the force that binds the universe. So our compassion of dealing with other people, it's not just about business. It's about having compassion for the, suffering of other people, and to help people genuinely with just some, without some blind objective. That's what I mean. You have to care about those people. You have to have the knowledge. You have to have the dedication. And then you have to forgive and move on. That's what I tell my daughter. Don't worry about what anybody else is doing. Just worry about what you're doing and how you're going to organize your life to be happy.
And that's what, and one of the things I've seen is that if once you forgive yourself and you have compassion for yourself, naturally it's going to flow out to other people. But if you're still hard on yourself, and you can see this in people, some people are so hard on themselves and creating such chaos in their lives, they tend not to be very compassionate and short-tempered with others. But I've seen it with myself. As I have forgiven myself and become where I honor myself for the creation that I am, that I have become far more compassionate and caring about others, and not feeling the need to express myself and show my knowledge and, all that stuff that I used to do a lot of. It's like going away. And it's
you have to also love yourself, because as I told you, stress makes you a much poorer host. And these bacteria don't want to hang out because they want to be nice. That's one of the things that people understand the least. It's a very complex symbiosis of these microbes with the body, and protection of the body from what they consider hostile takeover. It's a fascinating world. I mean, it would make Star Wars look like a cheap example if you really knew what was going on in your body. And the light show, if you could see all the photons communicating, would just boggle your mind. In order for this body to run, the amount of energy that has to be generated, the amount of interactions, billions upon trillions of interactions for us even to be communicating the way we are now.
Yes, it's amazing. Well, this is, I think, a great place to leave it now that we've.
Yes, there's a lot of topics we can talk about. I just want to end by saying there is a true big problem. Autism's not getting better. We have severe damages from these shots and the COVID. Spike proteins are being added to our vegetables. They're being sprayed in the air.
I didn't know this.
Yeah. There was a contract now with UC Davis that I think was made 3 years ago to incorporate spike protein into lettuce and spinach. I haven't seen any follow-up articles, and I wonder why, but it just horrified me.
What was their purpose for it?
It would be called auto vaccination.
I knew they were talking about putting it in vectors, in insects like mosquitoes.
Yeah, that's another way.
That's Bill Gates' thing.
Yeah, it is a Bill Gates thing. And so we know that he gave them a grant to try to incorporate the spike proteins. It's a way of auto vaccination, and I don't understand how that can be done without your consent.
There are all kinds of things being done without our consent.
Yeah. So what I'm saying, be happy and control the things you can't control, because we have been dumbed down. We have magnificent minds. The AI copies the configuration of our neurons in our brains, and we're capable of all of that. We've just been told we're not smart. We are very smart. We're creators. We're people that God has infused many talents in us that we forget. And we lose those talents because of the anger, fear, animosity, all those negative things. They're energy that vibrates at a certain level and doesn't allow us to progress and build a better society. So when we have people that really love humanity, love themselves, and only think of doing good, you will be surprised the miraculous changes that will take place.
I have something that I'm going to show you. Have you ever seen one of these?
No.
Okay, this is called Vibe, and I did a lot of research on it. It's by Razana Health, and
Hmm.
it is a frequency device. You know how they did the frequency medicine? And
Yes, yes.
this is, this is not the most powerful, like the hospitals and stuff use the more powerful
Hmm.
higher frequencies. This has a few higher ones, but it has things like acne, ADHD, allergy, Alzheimer's. Anyway, it works. I've been doing it. It's not like it's not going to just knock your socks off, but it does.
Not like
It's
a med bed. They have these medical beds now that have the
yeah.
frequencies and the lights. So yes. So you're using that to help you with your vibrational cycles.
Well, and it helps because they explain it. It's like a tuning fork. So if you have
Hmm.
this one is at this higher frequency and this one's at a lower frequency, and you hit this one will end up resonating to the higher frequency. It'll match the higher frequency, and that's the way this works. Is so they've gotten the
Hmm.
frequencies from people, of course, who are healthy and have no anxiety or whatever. So it's
Yeah.
resonating at a higher frequency, and then you put it on and wear it, and it gets you to resonate to a higher frequency. And I've done allergy, which it does help, and I've done anxiety, which is noticeable difference, definitely noticeable
Mhm.
difference with anxiety, and
Wonderful.
got all kinds of frequencies in there. And I just,
Yeah. And don't forget that the radio and the television were set at negative frequencies specifically so that they would hook us, and that's what I tell people, go to bed early, which I need to do because I'm a night owl. Wake up in the morning, see the first sunrise, give thanks and figure out how you're going to be happy that day. Doesn't matter what happens. All of it is a nuisance. People sometimes become a nuisance, but don't let that color your day because, as I said, the happier you are, you're also a more conducive host to these beneficial bacteria, which is really stunning information for me that they react to your behavior, your mood, and they also can affect your behavior and mood. So it's a loop. It's not, that loop has to be in sync in order for the body to function beautifully. So that's I can leave you with. And I'm pleading with women, to think twice about these new diet plans, Ozempic-like products, which are causing everybody to look like robots, honestly.
and it destroys the gut. I hear everybody, I mean, there's some people that I've talked to, but I had one friend, he had type 2 diabetes, and I helped him with his diet, and he brought that all down. But before that, he was already doing the diet, the whole food plant-based diet, and then and his blood sugar was coming down. He goes to the doctor says,
And
"Oh, this is great, you're losing weight, your blood sugar is coming down. Now I want you to take this drug. This will really help and make this work better, what you're doing." And he wanted him to take, one of those Ozempic drugs. It was already working. What he was doing was working really well, but he wanted him to take that on top of it. And I was like, no, 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 don't. And then,
yeah, and I also want to warn people that I was all for berberine, but berberine does basically the same thing. It slows down dumping of food from the stomach into the intestine, slows down peristalsis. And when I read that, I said, no, I can't, I don't care if it's a natural thing that they call a natural. I said, guys, you got to investigate everything. I said, hello, arsenic is natural, but do we want to ingest a lot of it? No. so,
but
so
one
I
of the,
tell people, just because they tell you it's a natural Ozempic, that doesn't mean you should be taking it because anything that slows down digestion and peristalsis will ultimately damage your body and will make you less of a desirable host by the true beneficial bacteria.
I
And
just,
that's the next biggest problem I see now.
oh yes, and that we're creating. One of the things I'm going to tell you about myself, most people don't know this, because I have all these different food sensitivities. I'm only able to eat cooked green vegetables
Mm-hmm.
and beans, not lentils, not peas, just beans. That's it. And olive oil. And so what I had to do is I had to figure this out to get enough calories. So I eat probably about 4 to 6 pounds of vegetables a day that I cook. And then I eat probably about 3 cups of beans, cooked beans a day. And then I have about 1/4 cup of olive oil. And that gets me up to about 1,400 calories. And so I eat that. I can't take any vitamin supplements, can't take anything. And whenever I have my nutrient levels checked, they're like off the charts. I have no deficiencies with anything at all.
Yeah.
Nothing. No deficiencies. I mean,
One of the things, even if you're not compromised, I'd like to talk, if we ever do this again, that people should not be consuming raw vegetables, especially at this time.
this time, yes. And that is important for people to know. And I do know about that because of the farming practices and the runoff from the factory farms. And
We just don't have a body that can handle all of this raw.
we don't. No.
And there's all kinds of problems. And now they're even talking against green vegetables. I mean, the information for the poor person is overwhelming. They don't know what to believe, what to accept. One doctor's telling you, don't eat this, this is all bad. Next doctor's saying, oh yeah, this is okay under these conditions. So I can imagine. But I just tell people, salad, green salad, tomatoes or cucumbers and some onions is okay if you can handle them raw, but everything else should be sauteed with olive oil, and because breaking down vegetables by sauteing them or steaming them helps you digest them. And since majority of the people now in North America have digestive problems, I would suggest they do that. And especially if they have dysbiosis, irritable bowel syndrome, or God forbid, Crohn's or colitis, they should not be consuming anything raw.
Right. I agree completely with that. And I've seen that with people. And I always tell people that who have gut problems, you've got to cook your vegetables. And so anyway.
I also have ending on this note, I also have a protocol for people who have taken Ozempic and now can't go to the bathroom or can't digest, or they're taking the medication no matter what. I'm not judging you, but you do need help with digestion and peristalsis because the rise of paralysis of the stomach, which is called gastroparesis, is also exploding. And that's a big concern for me.
And I had that too. I mean, that was part of the symptoms I've had. I don't have that at all anymore because I was so sick. So I was on my deathbed. So I'm getting well slowly. I am getting better and better. But I would have that every time I would have a bad flare up. I would have the gastroparesis. It was like everything would just shut down. And I don't have that anymore. So that's a big improvement.
Yeah. And so, we want to wish everybody the best. Anytime you want to speak with me again, I'll be happy to. There's so much going on. There's so much misinformation that people really need to focus and to know what they're doing and not just listen to the last 30 seconds of somebody that looks sexy or looks great telling you something, because there's a lot of misinformation going out.
So we did this time we did a generalized subject matter, but quickly before you sign off, I would like for you again to give everybody the contact information.
Right. Please look us up at www.natren, Natren. It's a combination of the name Natasha Trenev, if you want to remember, .com, or call our ladies and one gentleman at 866, the number 4, and then you spell out the name Natren, Natren, and they're there from 7 to 4 Pacific Standard Time. And we have a live chat. You can contact us through the live chat. We have people from all around the world contacting us, a live chat. And I can tell you the people we have worked there are really dedicated. And they said it gets them up in the morning because they know they're going to help people. And I love that about our company. Beautiful,
beautiful. And so again, this is so important, the information, and what I bring the good news, because this is my focus, is bring solutions, and I find the real solutions, and Natasha Trenev and Natren and ProTren are real solutions. So it would behoove all of you to take advantage of this. So thank you so much, Natasha. And it's always a pleasure to see you again. And I look forward to us getting together again.
Oh, I'd love to have you visit us. Thank you, everyone. And let's all help each other, because as a community, we can get better and stay better.
Yes. God bless you for
Yeah.
everything you do.
Thank you.
Thank
Be
you.
well.
Bye-bye. You too.
Bye-bye.